Okay, we are live with Preston Dennett, UFO expert, published 30 books on the field. And Preston, I was just telling you before we started the interview, my audience is, I would say, a lot of people who support people like Tommy Robinson, anti-illegal immigration, but really a mistrust of the government. And this certainly applies to the field of UFOs. There's a lot of cover-ups. That's, I think, part of the lore, but it's seeming to be less fiction and more fact. We see people like Joe Rogan consistently talking about things that we have eyewitness testimonies, things like that. And I thought it would just be great to bring you onto the show to share with our audience that this stuff is real and it's coming. And so thank you, Preston, for being here.
Pleasure and an honor. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So Preston, you're the subject matter expert. So I might have a few questions, but I think you're the educator that our audience needs. The initial question that I have for you is, it seems like the establishment media loves to paint UFO witnesses as crazy or looking for attention. And that seemed to have been the historical kind of narrative surrounding it that was taboo. But now more and more, I would say the tables have been turning and it's almost like there's too many witnesses, too much testimony. And so the whole world can't be crazy. And so do you agree with that? Has there been a shift in terms of, okay, this is the new normal, and now we're all looking at the government to acknowledge something?
Yeah, I think that's true to some extent. I don't think they're being truthful or transparent by any means. I think basically their hand has been forced, that if they don't admit that there's validity to this subject, they're going to become irrelevant and not credible. And basically that's where they're at. I think most people realize that our governments are lying about this subject, and frankly many others, and withholding information. So I think they're trying to sort of spin the narrative, gain control of public opinion, and not doing a very good job with it. There's no doubt in my mind that there is a cover-up that's demonstrably true. It's not speculative in terms of the UFO subject, and I think that they're really trying to get ahead of that, but it's been too long in terms of how long they've been covering this up and lying about it. I mean, their record on this subject is heinous. They've lied from day one and are still lying about it.
Right. And so if someone were to Google government cover up aliens, UFOs, there's just tons and tons. It's never ending, right? The British government, US. Would you say that like now in 2025, at least with America, there's been maybe a little bit of a tailwind towards, I don't know, something being released? Is Trump considered a more UFO friendly president, would you say?
I'm a little bit. Most of the presidents have made some really intriguing statements about this subject, usually towards the validity of it. But
Right.
none has really come. We've never had a sitting head of state just flat out say UFOs are real, which wouldn't be that hard to do. So we're not seeing that. I think, our current administration is a little bit more transparent than most, perhaps. So I'm hopeful, but honestly, having been in this field for 40 years, I don't think we'll ever have absolute disclosure. Because as you said, our governments have portrayed UFO witnesses as either the victims of hoaxes, hallucinations, misperceptions, or mental illness. Yeah, there has been a turnaround, but to me, the only really good thing that's coming out of these recent congressional hearings is that it's bringing more people into this field, bringing some legitimacy to it. But our governments have yet to admit to the validity of many, many high-profile UFO cases. I would point to just a couple as an example.
Sure.
1952, there was a huge flyover over the U.S. Capitol. Have not admitted to that, and that's very well documented with multiple witnesses, radar confirmation, and so forth. Another would be the Roswell incident, 1947, New Mexico. There's about 100 books on that subject, some 500 witnesses, again, very well documented. They were asked about that during the congressional hearings and said that they had no reporting on it, which is just not credible. Another would be the Malmstrom incident in Montana. This is March 1967, when UFOs basically shut down our intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's a very well-known case. And they were asked about that and said that they knew nothing about it. Again, I don't find that credible. So until and unless they're willing to admit to the truth of that, I don't trust them. I don't think we should look to them for answers. I came into this field very naive, not realizing there's a government cover-up, but there is. And so looking outside of the UFO field, I was really dismayed to see how our governments are treating all humanity, really. In the US government, they have irradiated soldiers without their permission or knowledge. They've fed people hallucinogenics. They have sterilized people. I mean, this is not benevolent behavior by any means. And I think we're seeing the same kind of nefarious goings on with this UFO subject.
So I guess the obvious question, my audience is probably wondering this as they're listening to this in the future, near future. The question is why, right? You mentioned nefarious. Of course, every government has nefarious levels to it. But I would say, big picture, we like to think that at least security wise, right, every country wants to maintain their sovereign borders and they want to protect themselves against opposing armies, whether it's terrorists or aliens, right? And so is there a defense nature to this? Like, because why is the government covering it up? That's the root of the question here.
Yeah, that is the $1,000,000 question, which is very hard to answer, but I think we've got a pretty good handle on it. I can see from a military perspective in the beginning why this certainly would be an alarming subject to find that you have craft out there, people who you know really nothing about, flying around in our skies and basically doing whatever they want, and we can't touch them. But as you do research into this subject, it becomes clear that ETs, UFOs, are not here to hurt us. And in fact, if you take a really good, hard, objective, deep look into the first-hand contact cases, you see a very prominent pattern of guiding, teaching, healing, warning. People who are taken on board over and over again are given the same messages about this. So they're not here to hurt us, is my point. They've been around for a very long time, and all the previous government quote UFO studies have said there's no national security threat. There's no such thing as UFOs. So for now, for them to completely reverse their opinions, oh yeah, there are UFOs and they are a national security threat, is disingenuous. They know there's no threat. I think the reason behind the cover-up is ultimately because we do have this technology. We have captured ET craft. We have the bodies. This is not just the Roswell case. Research that particular aspect of it. There are hundreds of cases like this. The number of whistleblowers out there are really compelling. I mean, there's a lot. And I think we have enough testimony to say pretty solidly that we have reverse engineered this technology. And our problem with our governments is they weaponize all technology. Sooner or later, that's what they do. And I think that's one of the main reasons behind the cover-up, because they have a hold of this technology and don't want to release it. But it's all about power, control, greed, money. I think that's the bottom line. We have an economy that's basically oil-based. We have an economy that makes millions off of the pharmaceutical industry. Can you imagine what would happen if we released healing technology? Which I believe they have. It would destroy the profits of the whole pharmaceutical industry and the oil industry.
Right.
Let's face it, there would be a big changes if all of this technology came out. So I think ultimately that's the underlying cause behind the UFO cover-up.
Yeah, I read online cases of cancer being cured from people who said that they had contact with aliens, and like that's kind of amazing. And that's that's a shift because we think national defense, security, lasers, but here we have testimonies of diseases being cured. That was kind of eye opening. It's not what we're told in Hollywood about the aliens.
Exactly, and there's a lot of it. Those cases have gotten almost no attention. I focused a lot of my research on that
Right.
because I can tell you researchers all over the world have multiple cases. Timothy Good in the UK, definitely, Philip Mantle, but all over the world, Michael Hesseman, Barbara Lamb, Edith Fiore, Kathleen Martin, Timothy Beckley, Brad Steiger, Bud Hopkins, David Jacob. I could go on. John Mack. This is a big part of the contact experience. And that's the last thing our governments want us to know, that there are people out there who are living peacefully, who have conquered a lot of the problems we're facing, who live without money. And basically, I think our governments are trying to enslave us, essentially. It's really unfortunate because I think there are good people in government. I'm not going to blame every single person in government for being bad actors, but there's an element in there. The intelligence agencies, the Pentagon, the highest levels of the military industrial complex. Those are the folks that we have to watch out for. Those are the folks behind the cover-up. So I think we're in a real difficult situation right now. to try to get the truth out. It's why I do this research. I think we all deserve to know the truth, but we're in quite a fix right now.
You mentioned obviously the government, it's a big topic of this, but in terms of the military, is there evidence that there has been technology that has been picked up from UFOs or aliens and has been acquired by, let's just say, the US government and used? We hear little rumors, we hear this, we hear that. We heard in the recent Venezuela operation where they captured Maduro, there was mention of some sonar weapons that they use, which like just basically I don't know, blinded soldiers or made them, I don't know, just crazy stuff. Like that was a little snippet. And then President Trump alluded to, he actually said that we have things that people never heard of and blah, blah, blah. And so I wondered for the first time, because the more you read about the UFO stuff, the more you read about shocking levels of military technology, light years ahead, et cetera. And so if the US does indeed have some, whether it's a craft that they have, or I mean any number of examples, can we be sure that the US military has acquired military technology from contact with aliens?
Yeah, I think we can be reasonably certain about that. At this point, it's still largely anecdotal. And by that, I mean, you can't just go out and prove this very easily. However, two, there's ways of coming at this, two angles. We have a lot of insiders, government whistleblowers, people within the aerospace industry who have flat out said this is exactly what's happening. Bob Lazar, of course, is very famous for this, but he was just one early whistleblower out of quite literally thousands of them. But also we have a number of people reporting encounters that are clearly not ET. I would point to the TR-3B, large triangular shaped craft, which flies pretty much silently. It's not using propellants as we would think of it. There's quite a bit of information and encounters, firsthand encounters of these kinds of things. So I think we have enough testimony to say absolutely that yes, our government has these craft. I would point to researchers like Michael Schratt, for example, who's really the go-to guy on reverse engineering cases. And if you talk to him, he'll say something like 80% of what people are seeing is government. James Goodall is another one who's an aerospace historian. He's very knowledgeable in this field. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, certainly, and I think almost all researchers will agree that quite a bit of what's flying around is our own.
Crazy. Well, hopefully, I mean, the fun part about President Trump, politics aside, whether you agree with whatever this and that, he seems to be willing to share a little bit more than your average president. And so hopefully he's going to let something interesting slip. And he seems to be getting closer to it, whether it's related to
I hope
UFOs,
so,
right?
because
He's
I
unfiltered.
agree. Yeah, he's definitely been more truthful, or I should say transparent, with bringing cameras in and answering questions and press conferences pretty much, if not daily, weekly, which we haven't seen with previous administrations. And he's definitely tackling some subjects and areas that other administrations have not. So I'm hopeful. We'll see. I think that this cover-up is no joke. We know that people have lost their lives over this. This is absolutely certain, because I've talked to some whistleblowers myself. One guy was on his deathbed and finally said, you know what? It's time. I want to do my part to move this subject forward. And what an honor that was. And most major researchers have whistleblower accounts. So we're still not seeing the actual hardware. The Roswell craft is not in a museum where you can go and visit it. Where is all this stuff? It's secreted in various Air Force bases and around the world. And we need to get to that point where there's much more truth and transparency with this subject. And I don't know that we'll ever get there. I think that disclosure is inevitable because the subject is true. But I don't know that our governments, and I'll just underline this, will do it voluntarily. If you could force their hand somehow, if we could follow the money, see, because the black budget is out of control. This is where a lot of our money, tax dollars, is going. To me, our governments all across the world take this subject very seriously. You might be skeptical. You might think, no, why should I care? It's not affecting my life. It is. It absolutely is. Your life would change drastically if we could get this technology released.
Right. So, yeah, you touched on it. I wanted to ask you. So Area 51 obviously is, I guess, arguably the biggest story in terms of universally known. And I was wondering if you could just kind of walk us through basic elements of the story, because for my audience, a lot of us are living in the UK, in London, etc. Um, I grew up in New York, and growing up, you'd hear about Area 51, but the one thing I noticed is that every 10 years, it seemed to be that the government would expand the restricted zone further and further and further away from it. And just as, a normal American, I just thought that was interesting and odd. It's almost cartoonish how it just keeps getting further and further. And so I grew up hearing about it, but would you mind just kind of giving a quick 60-second run through of like what happened in Area 51, but more importantly, why is the government restricting it further and further and further if they maintain that nothing happened?
Yeah. Well, Area 51 is located in Nevada. I've been next to it, of course, not inside of it. Quite a few whistleblowers coming out of Area 51, which is an area where they allegedly test advanced aircraft. And we know that at least that much is true. And it is massive. This is just north of Las Vegas. And it's important to note that Nevada is some 89% owned by our government. So basically, the entire state is owned by the government. And yeah, when Bob Lazar broke his story, he put Area 51 on the map. Before then, it wasn't really well known at all when he did that, because he was bringing people up to Tickaboo Peak, overlooking Area 51, and showing them these demonstrations of UFOs. Well, the government bought that land off, and yes, continued to buy the land around this area to restrict people's view. It's very odd because there's also this angle of publicity towards it. I mean, they named the highway the extraterrestrial highway. So it's a bit of a dog and pony show, but there's no doubt in my mind that Area 51 is real and that there's stuff going on there that would absolutely blow people's minds.
It's crazy. Yeah, I guess the dog and pony show is funny because it's probably there's elements of local tourism efforts, obviously, but the U.S. government just keeps. I didn't realize that they own it. By the way, that's the first time I'm hearing that they own that land, and that's how they're able to legally restrict tourists from getting closer and closer.
Yeah, they 89%. I mean, that's shocking. And if you look at how much land our government owns, they own significant portions of every single state here in the United States. I'm not sure about outside of the U.S., but it wouldn't surprise me if it's comparable. But yeah, Nevada is more government owned than any other state. And I think there's a reason for that.
Is there anything anecdotally you could recall that's related to Area 51 from all the people you've spoken to or researched, just to share with our audience, things that we haven't really seen online? Anything, any insider stuff?
Yeah, yeah, I would say
I'd love to
there's
hear.
quite a few researchers have reports from Area 51, whether it's Linda Moulton Howe or Bill Hamilton or, gosh, a lot of them, George Knapp, certainly. From what I understand, there's quite a bit going on there in terms of reverse engineering of ET craft, but experiments in genetics, bio warfare, this sort of thing. It goes down many levels underground. So we're putting it together all piecemeal, and so it's very hard to get a full picture of what exactly is going on there. I did interview a gentleman who some of these details, but each person only has a little piece of the puzzle.
Right.
But yeah, from what I understand, it's quite a huge operation going many, many levels underground, which is not surprising because if you look into that, they're called DUMBs, deep underground military bases. Most military bases go deep underground. So the amount of technology down there, from what I understand, is far in advance of anything that's publicly released. So flat screen TVs came out relatively recently. From what I understand, they were standard issue back in the 1950s. So they have technology, I know, that can look through solid walls, ceilings, objects. They have all kinds of technology that we would think was straight out of Star Trek. Healing technology that can close wounds or detect tumors in the body or all kinds of things that we'll probably never see. So there's a lot to unpack in terms of Area 51 and these other deep underground military bases.
So you mentioned before about the reason why we might not ever see some of this technology is because there's bigger interest at play, whether it's the oil and gas industry or pharmaceutical industry, right? Not wanting certain diseases to be cured, et cetera. But I want to just go back to the military technology aspect. Uh, if the U.S. government possesses advanced technology, surely they are using it in war and in battle, and have used it previously. I'm assuming. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're keeping a lot of what they have under wraps. We had a recent wave of drones, I'll call them, in New Jersey last year,
Right.
which caused a lot of attention. And it wasn't just limited to New Jersey. Frankly, it went up across the world. And the coverage on that was crazy, so contradictory. Some people saying it's ET. I don't think it was. Talking to people who are insiders, I do believe that was our own technology. And there they did kind of play their hand because some of these things were described as moving very quickly, silently, quite large, just glowing orb like objects. Don't think that was your standard UFO, meaning, of extraterrestrial origin. But I would underline that the evidence for the validity of UFOs is pretty much at this point 100% conclusive. Whether you believe it or not, if you look into it, there's radar returns, there's landing traces, there's implant removals, there's the photographic record is absolutely unbelievable. The number of eyewitness testimony, numbers in the millions at this point, not kidding, millions of documented cases. So the real problem is that it is sort of the waters are muddied up with our government inserting disinformation and basically flying these things around, portraying this fear-based narrative, putting forth this whole idea that ETs are enemies, which is patently ridiculous. If you look into the subject, it's just absurd to even believe that. ETs have been around forever. We've got very good evidence of this. So it's a mess to try to get to the bottom of what's going on here. But I can tell you one thing for sure, our governments are neck deep involved in this. Again, this is something they take incredibly seriously.
So when you say governments plural, obviously that's not just America. Can you share maybe some other governments that you believe have knowledge and possession of some of these superior technologies?
Yeah, I'm going to say most, if not all of the major, certainly the superpowers, as we would think of them. Russia, we know. The UK, absolutely. Brazil, Chile, Mexico, France, Japan, they all know about this. And, we have all these wars and nationalism and things like this. The divisiveness is kind of just a show because let's face it, the military industrial complex is selling weapons to both sides. At a very high level, our governments, this is my understanding, are cooperating with this subject to withhold it from all humanity, essentially. Some governments have been more truthful than others. There's a lot of interest here in the US, so there's quite a bit of information coming out. But the Mexican government, for example, has been a little more forthcoming, I think because of some incidents that have happened there that have been absolutely undeniable. For example, in 1991, there was a sighting over Mexico City during the solar eclipse where some 30 separate witnesses filmed this object, a daylight disk, over the city. So you could triangulate it, you could see exactly how large this was, how high up, and you couldn't cover it up. They've had some really high-profile incidents and have been somewhat more forthcoming, perhaps, than the United States. Same with the Brazilian government. If you look into how our governments have reacted with this subject, you'll see that, yeah, some are more forthcoming than others, but all of them are covering it up. And you start to follow the breadcrumbs and you'll see, oh my gosh, they are cooperating with this.
Amazing. Uh, and I guess I have another more technical question, just going back to President Trump, just because it just seems he's so unfiltered that he might be our best shot to reveal a little bit extra or something we deserve to hear. But do you think, like, how much do they actually share with, you know, I guess the executive branch, right? Someone gets elected, whether it was Obama, Trump, Biden. Do they have a meeting with someone who from the defense who basically spills the beans on everything, or is it kind of kept separate in order to protect this interest? I don't want to say like, I don't want to get too conspiratorial about the deep government stuff, et cetera, but it sounds like it's almost independent of the president and his team, would you say?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's independent because we're dealing, in terms of the executive branch, with almost exclusively elected officials. And I think some presidents, I would point to, the first Bush administration, are probably in the know, in the loop. He was the head of the CIA.
Right.
So that, I think, is a big indicator. Carter was supposedly informed of the situation, but I doubt any of them are fully informed. They get one bean. They don't spill the beans. They get one or two beans. That's it. They are not in the loop. It's the military industrial complex. These are non-elected officials. These are people we can't touch with the Freedom of Information Act. They are lifetime members, and the executive branch changes every 4 years. On the outside, 8. So, no, they're not in the loop. They don't get the whole story. I think some get more than others, but definitely, no, they're not really the ones who are running the country, is what I'm saying. It's the Pentagon. It's the intelligence agencies. It's the energy industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, the banking industry. These are the ones who are running the country. So you can see this with the nepotism going on and who gets into office and who doesn't. It goes straight down through to city government, all the way up to federal government. Bone chilling when you start to really peel the layers of the onion back and see who's behind all this. There is a cabal of very, very rich people, rich families who own 99% of the wealth. That's crazy when you think about it. So it's, again, a situation that's going to be very difficult to extricate ourselves from. The president has very little power in terms of moving this subject forward. I hope, Trump's unfiltered. I hope that he can just go up there and spill some of these beans. Say it, because we've never had that. All across the world, we've never had a sitting government admit to the validity of the UFO phenomena flat out. There's little hints and, little breadcrumbs. We're awfully close right now in terms of all the congressional hearings and the interest in Congress with this subject. I am encouraged that our Congress did say flat out there is a UFO cover-up. So that was definitely a step forward. But we need to see the evidence. They're showing us these little blurry films, and a good number of them. There was a recent documentary which was supposed to blow the lid off the cover-up. The Age of Disclosure, I think it was called. It didn't. I watched it. It was very fear-based. It was all the bad actors, basically, talking heads, pushing this fear-based narrative. And some of what they were showing was our own technology. And they were saying, no, this is ET. I'm like, well, no, it's not. It's not ET. This is us. So this is how difficult it is to get to the truth of what's going on here.
Crazy. The good part is you mentioned the congressional hearings, but it's also just the fact that Joe Rogan routinely talks about it, and he puts people on his platform in this field, and he's the number one podcast in America. So that's comforting that he's talking about it, and he's obviously, I wouldn't even call him a believer. It's just a fact that there's other things at play that were not being shared.
Well, there's a reason he's the number one podcaster, because he talks about the subject, which has
Right.
enormous interest behind it. This subject is growing in popularity by leaps and bounds. And so this is a lot of pressure on our governments to act on this subject. So I'm guessing they're scrambling behind the scenes on how to handle this.
Definitely. And so, so Preston, I want to thank you for coming on. Before I let you go, I'm going to have to ask for a prediction. But in the realm of, I would say, like, seems that we're getting closer to, I would say, forcing the government's hand to reveal something. I mean, the number one podcaster is talking about it at least once a month. But the other kind of finishing touch would be if there was, I don't know what the term is, a mass scale kind of witnessing, right? You mentioned in Mexico there's 30 people. Is it possible within our lifetimes that there would be an incident or viewing where, let's just say, like, I don't know, 50,000 people at a baseball game in Yankee Stadium in New York witness a UFO or something like that? Is that, could that happen, or is it specifically not happening? Are these incidents specific, kind of isolated, so as not to have a mass viewing event? Because that would certainly just flip the tide totally.
Well, here's my answer to that. It's already happened. The 1950s, there was a UFO that flew over a soccer stadium in Italy. Some 40,000 people saw it. The Mexico City event was not just viewed by 30 people, it was viewed by everyone in Mexico City. There's been an enormous number of huge, widely viewed UFO events throughout history. In 1954 in France, there was a massive wave that left zero doubt to the validity of this subject, followed immediately by a wave in Venezuela. And if you look into the history of the subject, the Malmstrom event is a good example, a very much undeniable UFO event. The ETs have already done their part to disclose. The rest is up to us. I would not count on them to do any more so-called displays. That's a term UFO researchers came up with a long time ago. They have put on displays. I wrote a whole book about schoolyard encounters, where they come down. The Rua, Zimbabwe case in Ariel Elementary School is the primary example of this, where some 200 kids saw this. But at Westall High School in Melbourne, Australia, Crestview Elementary School in Florida, Hillsdale College in Michigan, these are UFO displays, and there's been so many of them. Absolutely, ETs have already done that. So I would not count on any more displays. From what I understand, they're not even here right now. This is coming, I'm coming from a contactee angle here. So no, I wouldn't count on that, but I think that this subject disclosure will happen sooner or later simply because this subject is true. It's undeniable. You can distort the truth. You can deny it. You can ignore it. You can try to hide it, but you will never destroy it. The truth is indestructible. It's inviolable. So sooner or later it will come out. And a day may come if there's an existential crisis on this planet where they do show up in large numbers. So we'll see. But no, I don't think they're going to be putting on any more displays anytime soon because they already have. And if people cannot wake up to that fact, that's on us because the evidence is absolutely there for anyone who objectively examines it. Skeptics do not have a leg to stand on. I'm sorry, if you don't believe in UFOs, you have not done your homework. And it's that simple.
So you're saying the rest is up to us?
100%. Yep. It's time for us to grow up.
Amen. Thank you so much for your time today, Preston. Look forward to talking again in the future.
Pleasure and an honor. Thank you.